The flash popped, white and blinding, and in that frozen second, I felt my son's hand press against my arm, firm, almost rehearsed. He leaned close enough that only I could hear him over the chatter and the clicking camera shutters. "You don't belong here." 4 words. They weren't shouted. They weren't whispered with regret. They were flat, delivered like a cashier reading out the price of milk. My throat tightened, but I didn't answer. Not in front of my grandchildren, not in front of his wife's family lined up in perfect symmetry. All of them dressed in matching blue and beige like they were auditioning for a catalog spread. The photographer, some young guy with too much gel in his hair, was clapping his hands. "Okay, everyone, closer. Big smiles. Make this the perfect family shot." I took a half step back. Nobody noticed. Or maybe everyone did and pretended not to. I had been asked to stand at the far left of the group, near the potted palms that smelled faintly of fertilizer. Not beside my son, not beside my grandchildren, like a guest shoved in at the edge so the symmetry wasn't broken. His wife's parents were centered, radiant, pulling my grandchildren onto their laps. My late wife would have seen the arrangement for what it was. Deliberate, calculated, a rearrangement of bloodlines captured on glossy paper. My son's arm slid away, and he adjusted his blazer like nothing had happened. The photographer counted down again. 3, 2, 1. Smiles erupted like triggered fireworks. I didn't join. I let the camera capture me as I was, unsmiling still, a man who had just been told he was unnecessary. When the flash died, I turned, picked up my coat, and walked out before the next pose was set. Nobody stopped me. The door closed behind me with a quiet click, and the laughter inside muffled into a hum. Outside, the evening air was sharper than I expected. My shoes echoed against the concrete as I crossed the empty parking lot. A banner above the entrance still fluttered. "Family is forever." The irony burned my throat. By the time I reached my car, I could feel the weight pressing down, not just from my son's words, but from the months that had led to them. The gradual shift, the way decisions about family weekends were announced, not asked. The way I found out about my granddaughter's piano recital only through a neighbor's Facebook post. The way his wife's parents now occupied the seats at the table my late wife had chosen, while I was given the folding chair in the corner. Grief is strange. When my wife passed, I thought my son and I would lean on each other, 2 branches of the same broken tree. Instead, he drifted, no, he was pulled into another orbit, one that had no room for me. And now the verdict had been spoken aloud. I didn't belong. I sat behind the wheel but didn't start the car. My fingers gripped the leather steering wheel until my knuckles turned pale. Anger clawed at the edge of my ribs, begging to be unleashed. But anger was what they wanted. Anger would prove them right, would make me the problem. I forced myself to breathe. In. Outside, I thought of my wife, her voice steady and soft. Don't react. Act. So I pulled a notepad from the glove box, the one she used to keep for grocery lists. On the first clean page, I wrote 1 sentence in block letters. Make this day unforgettable, for the right reasons. I didn't know yet what that meant, only that I would not fade into the background like they expected. By the time the parking lot emptied and only a few cars remained under the buzzing streetlights, I felt something unfamiliar. Not just hurt, not just rage. Something cleaner, sharper, a decision forming like steel cooling in water. They thought they could erase me from a photograph. I would show them what could not be erased. And if you've ever had someone try to write you out of your own family, you'll understand why I couldn't just walk away. If stories like this matter to you, if you've ever felt the sting of being told you don't belong, stick around, Because what happened next is something none of them saw coming. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, creaking in circles, the shadow blades slicing the dark into segments. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard his voice again. "You don't belong here." By 5:30 a.m., I gave up pretending. Coffee hissed in the machine, the cheap kind that tastes like burnt wood but gets the job done. I pulled the notepad closer, the one with my promise scrawled across page 1. This wasn't going to stay just words. I started with evidence. I scrolled through my phone and opened the group chat titled Family Weekend. Except it wasn't family anymore. Somewhere along the way, my name had been removed. I knew because my daughter-in-law slipped once, mentioned a message I never got. I borrowed my neighbor's teenage son, who was better with phones than I'll ever be. In 5 minutes, he had pulled up archived notifications, proving I'd been quietly cut out months ago. Screenshots saved. Then the bank app. A line of transactions stared back at me. Utilities, lawn care, insurance premiums, all tied to the villa. The house I had bought, paid for, maintained since before my son could ride a bike. He was supposed to take over responsibilities, but the withdrawals were still hitting my account. His wife's name was on nothing. Her parents lived there most weekends, yet not a cent of theirs went toward it. I printed statements, every page labeled with a date. In the garage, I found the spare key. Or rather, I didn't. The hooks were empty. Last Christmas, I remember my son casually asking for a set just in case. A month later, I realized one was missing. Now I understood why. They hadn't asked permission since. They'd taken access. By mid-morning, a folder sat thick on my kitchen table. Screenshots, statements, photos of the hooks where keys should have been. Evidence not of love lost, but of boundaries erased. That's when I called David. David was more than a golf buddy. He was an attorney, the kind who didn't waste words. I told him the story in pieces. The photo, the erasure, the finances. He didn't gasp, didn't interrupt. When I finished, there was silence, then a low whistle. "You've been financing your own replacement," he said. "I know. You want advice or action?" "Both." He walked me through the options. Title records, access rights, trust structures. Words I'd never thought I'd need, now as sharp as weapons. He told me the first step wasn't confrontation, it was silence. Document, secure, prepare. No angry calls, no threats, quiet moves. So that's what I did. I went back through drawers I hadn't opened in years. Deeds, wills, tax forms. I laid them out across the table like puzzle pieces. My late wife's handwriting lingered in the margins of some. Little notes about birthdays or reminders to fix the roof. Every mark reminded me of what this was really about. This wasn't just property. This was her legacy. By evening, my plan had shape. I would let them think they'd won. Let them arrange another family weekend where I wasn't asked, just told. That was their pattern. To announce, to assume. I circled the date on my calendar, 2 days from now, when they'd all descend on the villa like it was theirs. This time, I wouldn't be there. Instead, I'd be ready. I shut the folder, slid it into the drawer of the desk, and locked it with the small brass key I hadn't used in years. For the first time in months, my chest felt steady. Not light, not happy, but steady. My son thought the words he used were final. You don't belong here. But belonging isn't handed down like a costume for a photograph. It's built, guarded, and sometimes defended. The clock struck midnight. I wrote another line in the notepad beneath the first. 1 week, no excuses. And I meant it. Patterns don't lie. People do. By Tuesday, I'd already mapped out the routine. They called it family weekend, but it was always the same. Friday evening arrival, Saturday takeover, Sunday brunch as if the house was their private resort. They brought groceries like they were doing me a favor, filled the fridge with imported cheese and organic juice, and left sticky notes about what they thought should be improved. My son had absorbed it like secondhand smoke. Didn't cough, didn't resist, just inhaled until it became his air. I watched, documented. Every calendar invite they sent to the group, minus me, ended up in screenshots. Every Amazon package addressed to his wife's parents but shipped to my villa was photographed, time-stamped. The pile of evidence grew, but information wasn't enough. Boundaries needed teeth. That's when I called Nick. Nick was half my age, lived 3 houses down, and spent his nights buried in servers and smart home gadgets. His own place looked like a science experiment, but he knew the systems better than anyone. I asked if he could stop by. He did, laptop under one arm, toolkit in the other. "What do you need, Mr. Carter?" "Control," I said simply. We walked the villa room by room. Nick installed new access points, secure cameras, digital locks synced only to my phone. He set up an entry log that tracked every time the door opened, every time the thermostat shifted, every time someone tried to bypass the system. Nothing illegal, nothing aggressive, just ownership sharpened into something verifiable. "You'll get alerts the second they try anything," Nick explained, tapping the app he loaded on my phone. "No one enters this house without your say-so, not even your son." The word stung, but I nodded. This wasn't about my son anymore. This was about the gravity pulling him off course. That night, with the app glowing in my hand, I made another call. This one was harder. "Hello?" A woman's voice answered. "This is Michael Carter," I said. "I used to support the St. Helena Wellness Foundation. My wife volunteered there before she passed." The pause was soft but heavy. "I remember her," the woman said. "She ran the poetry workshops for the veterans." My throat caught, but I pushed through. "I need to know if you still run the retreat program, the one she wanted to expand." "We do. Space has been the issue, always has been." I looked out the window at the villa, lit warm from the outside like a stage set. What if space wasn't an issue anymore? The silence stretched. Then the woman whispered, "You'd be answering a prayer." I told her nothing concrete, not yet. But I left the door open. By Wednesday, the lines were drawn. On one side, my son and his in-laws, rehearsing their ownership, scheduling their photo ops. On the other, me, with a folder of evidence, a fortified house, and an idea that might turn grief into something alive. I drove past the villa that night. Through the window, I could see the ghost of my wife in every corner. Her hand-painted tiles in the kitchen, the bookshelves she built from scratch. The thought of it becoming a stage for people who never knew her tightened my fists on the steering wheel. Not anymore. At home, I wrote in the notepad again. Saturday, 2 p.m. deadline. I underlined it twice. They thought the house was theirs. By the weekend, they'd learn it belonged to more than me. It belonged to memory, to legacy, to something they could never manipulate. And for the first time since that family photo, I felt anticipation, not dread, building in my chest. Saturday, 1:55 p.m. The notification pinged before I even heard the gravel crunch. Front gate opened. Unauthorized key detected. My phone vibrated again. Entry attempt logged. I was parked 3 streets away, engine off, windows cracked just enough to hear the cicadas buzzing. I could picture it without looking. their black SUV nosing into the driveway like it owned the pavement, doors slamming, voices carrying across the lawn. The system Nick installed didn't just track access. It greeted them. "Welcome. This property is secured. Please present authorized identification." I imagined their faces when the mechanical voice echoed through the foyer speakers. My daughter-in-law's sharp laugh, her mother's frown, my son's forced calm. I didn't have to imagine long, because the camera feed showed it all. They tried the front door. Locked. The app noted every failed attempt. Then they moved around back, jiggling the sliding glass. Nothing. The lights inside flickered once, twice, then dimmed to a sterile white. A warning, not a malfunction. "Dad!" My son's voice rang out, tight with frustration. "Dad, what the hell is this?" I didn't answer. The system did. "Owner not present, access denied." His wife's father cursed under his breath, pulling at the handle like brute strength would bend steel. The log ticked over again. Rear entry, denied. My phone hummed with each rejection, calm as a heartbeat. Inside, the HVAC shut down. Silence thickened. Then the speakers repeated, firm, "Unauthorized presence detected. This property is privately owned. Please vacate immediately." The camera caught my son glancing at his wife. For the first time in months, he looked smaller than her. They didn't leave, not right away. They lingered in the kitchen garden, debating. His mother-in-law called me 3 times. I let them ring out. Texts poured in, half angry, half incredulous. "This is childish. You can't lock us out. We're family." Each one saved, screenshotted, stored. Finally, the motion sensors logged their exit. The SUV pulled away slower than it had arrived. An hour later, my phone buzzed again. Police. 2 officers stood on the porch, captured by the camera feed. My son must have called, spinning it as a mistake. I watched as one officer knocked, waited, then glanced at his tablet. A moment later, the villa announced, "Owner authorization pending." The officer read the tablet again, then shrugged. His partner muttered something, and within minutes, they walked back down the steps. No forced entry, no crime. The law was clear. Property rights weren't family politics. My phone lit up with another call. This time, I answered. "What are you doing?" My son's voice was sharp, bordering on desperate. "What I should have done a long time ago," I said. "You locked your own son out of his home. It's not your home." My tone didn't rise, didn't shake. "And until you understand that, you're not welcome inside." There was a long silence. Then he hung up. I sat in the stillness of my car, the phone cooling in my hand. The cicadas droned on, indifferent. For the first time in years, I felt something settle in my chest. Not victory, not triumph, just clarity. The house had answered back. That night, the villa stood untouched, lights dimmed, doors sealed. My phone log read like a diary, every failed entry, every attempt, every piece of proof. They could rage, they could scheme, but the walls themselves had drawn the line. And for the first time since my wife's funeral, I slept through the night without waking once. They didn't wait long. By Tuesday, my son was at my front door. Not the villa, my home. He didn't knock gently. 3 sharp pounds rattled the glass panel, followed by his voice. "Dad, open up. We're talking about this now." I let him wait. Made him stand in the late afternoon sun until the heat turned his collar damp. Then I unlocked the door and stepped aside. He walked in fast, shoulders squared, jaw set like a man about to argue a traffic ticket. Behind him, his wife's parents stood with folded arms, pretending they weren't here to corner me. "You can't do this," he started. No greeting, no pause. You can't just lock us out like strangers. You broke in like strangers, I said evenly. His father-in-law snorted. That's our family home. No, I said. That's my wife's home. My home. Theirs only in stories you tell yourselves. My son exhaled hard like he was restraining himself. Then came the shift. Not reason, not apology. Manipulation. You're cutting yourself off from your grandchildren, he said. They don't understand why Grandpa won't let them play in the garden anymore. That's not what you're angry about, I replied. He pressed forward. Think about birthdays, holidays. Do you want them growing up thinking you abandoned them? You don't get to weaponize them against me. My voice was low, steady. I will always be their grandfather, but I won't be your ATM, and I won't be erased. The silence stretched. His wife's mother stepped in. If you're really going to be stubborn about this, we'll take legal action. We'll fight you in court. Do you really want this mess dragged out in public? I almost laughed. They thought court was a threat. They didn't know I'd already been preparing for it. You go ahead, I said. I'll bring every statement, every screenshot, every bill I've paid while you've sat in my chairs and smiled for my camera. I'll bring receipts of every weekend you treated my house like a resort. And then we'll see who a judge believes. His father-in-law shifted uncomfortably. For the first time, doubt flickered across his face. My son spoke again, softer now. Dad, this doesn't have to go this far. It already has. I walked to the desk, pulled out the brass key, and unlocked the drawer. The folders slid out, thick and heavy with documentation. I laid it on the table between us. This is everything, I said. Every transaction, every unauthorized entry, every word you've let them put in your mouth. He didn't reach for it, just stared. Next step is mine, I continued. And it won't be an argument. It'll be paper, binding, permanent. His mother-in-law scoffed. You're bluffing. I looked straight at her. Try me. No one spoke after that. The air was thick with something that wasn't quite anger anymore. More like the dawning realization that the rules had changed. That the man they thought they could sideline had stopped playing by their script. They left without slamming the door. But the silence they left behind was louder than any slam could have been. I sat back down at the table, folder in front of me, and flipped the notepad to a new page. In thick, deliberate strokes, I wrote, Law first, emotions second. The decision was made. This wasn't about winning an argument in a living room. It was about ending the erosion at its root. The appointment was booked for Thursday morning. Deeds, trusts, transfers. The kind of paper walls you don't kick down. And as I capped the pen, I felt no fear, no hesitation, only a cold clarity. If they wanted to play family politics, let them. I was done playing. Thursday morning smelled like paper and ink. The law office was quiet, walls lined with certificates and shelves of thick volumes no one had touched in years. David, my attorney, slid the documents across the polished oak table. Once you sign here, he said, tapping the dotted line, it's done. Irrevocable, I held the pen. The villa, our home, my wife's legacy, was about to leave the family ledger. Not into my son's hands. Not into his in-laws' control, into something untouchable, the St. Helena Wellness Foundation. My wife's name would be carved on the plaque above the door. The deed would show not my son, not his wife's parents, but the foundation as legal owner. With one clause, lifetime donor access for me and only me. A key no one could duplicate, a right no one could contest. The pen touched paper. My signature bled into the fibers. Final. David gathered the documents with quiet efficiency. They can bluster, they can threaten, he said. But this This is iron. By noon, the transfer was filed with the county clerk. Public record. Anyone who searched would see. The villa was no longer theirs to covet. It wasn't even mine. It belonged to Purpose. The first call came an hour later. My son's number. I answered. You gave it away? His voice cracked between disbelief and fury. I gave it back, I said, to something that will actually use it. You're insane. That was supposed to be yours? Because your in-laws whispered it into your ear? Number, it was never supposed to be theirs. It was never even supposed to be mine forever. It was your mother's dream. And now it'll serve people the way she wanted. He tried again. Anger, then guilt. Do you realize what you've done? You've destroyed this family. No, I said softly. I've saved what's left of it. By taking it out of your hands before you destroyed it yourself. He hung up. The second call came from his wife's father. His threats were louder, crude. We'll drag this through court, Carter. You'll regret it. Drag it, I replied. But you'll be dragging a charity, a veterans retreat, a wellness program for families in need. And I'd love to see you explain to a judge why you're suing to take beds away from wounded soldiers and their kids. The silence that followed told me everything. He hadn't expected a battlefield he couldn't win. By evening, the first ripples spread. The foundation posted a photo of me shaking hands with their director, documents in hand, captioned with words my wife would have loved. In honor of her legacy, this home will now welcome those who need healing most. Local press picked it up within hours. A small town paper snapped a shot of me on the villa's porch, the dedication banner hanging behind me. My late wife's name caught the light. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed non-stop. Half furious texts from my son and his in-laws, half messages of support from people I hadn't heard from in years. Old friends, neighbors, even strangers who saw the article online. Family photo had become something else entirely. Not a staged snapshot in matching colors, but a headline photo of a house no longer chained to their games. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table. The folder of evidence lay closed now, its job finished. In its place was a single newspaper clipping, fresh ink smudging my fingers. Local man donates historic villa to charity in wife's name. I read it once, twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in the notepad. On the next line beneath my last entry, I wrote, "Paper walls built. Storm over." And for the first time in a long time, I felt something close to peace. Saturday came dressed in sunlight. The villa, once just brick and glass, now wore banners strung across its porch. The Carter Retreat in memory of Anna Carter. My wife's name gleamed on the plaque at the entrance, letters cut deep into brass. Volunteers moved chairs across the lawn, arranging them in neat rows for the dedication. The air carried the smell of fresh paint and cut grass, the hum of something beginning. I stood at the edge of the crowd, not center stage. This wasn't about me. The foundation director gave a short welcome, her voice steady. Then she nodded, and it was my turn. I walked up, notes folded in my pocket, but I didn't take them out. I didn't need them. Anna believed a house was more than walls, I said, my voice carrying over the quiet. She believed it should be a place where people left lighter than when they came in. This house was our home, but now it will be more than that. It will be a place of rest for people who carry too much, for families who need space to breathe. That's what she wanted. And today, we honor her by making sure it happens. There was no applause, no theatrics, just silence, thick and reverent. A few nodded, a few wiped at their eyes. I stepped down, letting the foundation staff lead the rest. Tours of the new bedrooms, the therapy rooms, the garden restored to its original design. Laughter began to replace silence. The house wasn't empty anymore. It was alive. I drifted to the back fence, away from the speeches and cameras. That's when I saw him, my son, alone. He didn't wear the crisp blazer his wife favored. No matching family outfit, no parents-in-law in tow. Just him, hands shoved deep in his pockets, standing half in shadow, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to cross the lawn. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The crowd's murmur filled the gap between us. Then he walked over, slow, each step heavy. "Dad," he said quietly. I nodded. "You came?" Yeah." He looked at the plaque, then at me. His eyes were red, like he hadn't slept. "I didn't know you were going to do this." "You weren't supposed to." His mouth tightened. He stared at the ground. "They're furious. My wife, her parents. They say you humiliated us." "Did I?" My tone wasn't sharp, just steady. He didn't answer. He just kept staring at the grass, like the truth was written there. "I'm not here to fight you, Dad," he said finally. I don't know where to go from here." For the first time in months, his voice sounded like my son's. Not rehearsed, not borrowed, just his. I let the silence stretch, then spoke. "You have two choices. Stay in their shadow, let them script your life, your marriage, your kids, or step out of it. Get help, therapy, distance, honesty. And maybe, slowly, you and I rebuild. But it'll be on my terms." On real terms, he swallowed hard. "And if I don't? Then you walk away with them, and you lose me for good." The weight of it hung between us. A father's ultimatum, not from anger, but from necessity. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly. "I don't know if I can..." His voice trailed. "I'm not asking you to promise today," I said. "I'm asking you to decide who you want to be. And when you figure it out, I'll be here. But I won't wait forever." His eyes flicked up, just for a moment, meeting mine. For the first time, I saw something break past the fog. The boy who used to run down this lawn barefoot, chasing fireflies. He opened his mouth, closed it again, then turned away. I let him. Because this wasn't about dragging him back. It was about giving him one door left open and making sure he knew every other one was locked. As the sun slid lower, the dedication continued behind us. Laughter, music, children's voices filled the air. The house lived again. And for the first time, I felt like maybe I could too. The first guests arrive on a Wednesday just after noon, clutching duffel bags and a silence that looks heavier than luggage. A mother and her teenage son. A retired sergeant with a limp and a nervous laugh that comes too fast. A young couple who hold hands like it's the only thing keeping them from drifting apart. I stand by the gate and open it, not as an owner anymore, but as a man who knows where the light switches are. We start small. The foundation staff move with quiet purpose, showing rooms, handing out key cards, explaining how the kitchen works when the group sessions meet. Which trails are safe if you want to walk alone. Someone touches the banister my wife sanded herself and says, "This feels like home already," and I have to look away toward the garden to keep my face steady. In the evenings, the house breathes differently. It used to be the soft clink of wine glasses, playlists my wife picked, board games with our son at the table. Now it's light conversation that stops and starts. The stutter of new trust forming. At 9 o'clock the first night, I stand by the sink rinsing mugs, while a woman at the counter lists the small victories of her day. Got out of bed, drove here, didn't turn back. The words hang in the warm air, and the room seems bigger for them. A therapist sets up in the library. The couch faces the window, where the live oaks make patterns on the glass. I pass by once and hear only breathing and the scrape of a pen. Later, one of the men steps out with red eyes and thanks me for the quiet. He doesn't say more. He doesn't have to. I'm not staff. I'm not a counselor. I fix the door that sticks on humid afternoons. I replace the bulb on the back porch. I show a boy where we kept the fishing rods and tell him the story about how his line will always snag on the same rock unless he casts a little to the left. He casts to the left. The bobber trembles, then steadies, and he grins like the lake has forgiven him. On Friday, the kitchen fills with the smell of onions and garlic. Someone decides to make stew big enough to feed whoever wanders in. A woman I've never met washes carrots like she's polishing a memory. She asks me where the spice rack is and laughs when I point to the exact cupboard my wife always used. We eat standing up at the counter, paper bowls in our hands, people trading names and then forgetting them and learning them again. That's what happens when a place is safe. You don't have to be perfect to be welcome. I keep expecting the ache to ambush me when I turn a corner and see the reading chair my wife loved, the throw blanket she knit, the hairline crack in the tile she vowed to fix and never did. The ache comes, but it doesn't flatten me. It sits beside me like an old neighbor, familiar and polite. We watch people come and go, and I hear my wife's voice where it belongs. In the ordinary. Wipe your feet, take a plate, sit if you're tired. A week passes like that, and then another. The house holds. The schedule settles. The garden recovers from years of overuse and neglect. Bees find the lavender. Birds return to the fountain. I replace the little brass plaque on the gate, the Carter retreat, because the weather tarnishes it faster than I expect. Every time the light hits it, I think of my wife's laugh, low and surprised, like the world delighted her on purpose. My son stays away. I leave it alone. Boundaries are real only if you honor them when they hurt. I see his name pop up twice on my phone. I don't answer once, and I answer once. The first time I let it ring because I'm not ready to hear the old script. The second time, late on a Sunday when the house is quiet and the porch lights click on by themselves, I pick up. He asks how the retreat is going. I tell him the truth. He listens to the end without interrupting. Before he hangs up, he says, "I'm trying." He doesn't ask for the house. He doesn't ask for a key. He doesn't ask me to undo anything. For the first time, "I'm trying" sounds like a promise to himself, not a performance for me. We end the call with nothing resolved and everything changed. 2 mornings later, he appears at the edge of the driveway holding 2 coffees from the place his mother liked. He doesn't step onto the porch until I nod. When he does, he hands me a cup and doesn't talk for a minute. We stand there, looking at the lawn where he once played shortstop by himself, throwing grounders against the stone and diving into the grass like a hero. "I was wrong," he says. The words come out small and plain, without a bow. About the house, about a lot of things. I let the silence do the heavy lifting. Then I say, "I know." He stares at the plaque. "Mom would have liked this." "She would have liked you admitting it more," I say. And the corner of his mouth lifts, even though his eyes are wet. He tells me he's in counseling. He says he's spending time away from his in-laws, that it's noisier in his head now that there are fewer voices around him. He doesn't promise anything about the future. He asks if he can come by some mornings to help with small things, repairs, errands, whatever needs doing. I tell him yes to the mornings and no to the keys. He nods, and we both understand that this is what ground looks like when you test it for the first time after a landslide. Careful steps, no sudden moves, eyes on the horizon. That afternoon, the foundation director brings by a frame. Inside is a candid photo from opening day that I didn't know anyone had taken. It's the moment after the speech when a volunteer bends to tie a child's shoelace, and another guest holds a door for someone balancing two plates and no hands left. No one's posed. No one's centered. No one's trying to look like a family. They just are, because they chose to be there. I take the frame home that evening. My mantle has been bare since the studio shoot where I stepped out. Dust left a faint rectangle where the old portrait used to sit, the picture with the matching outfits and the choreographed smiles. I wipe the surface clean and place the new photo in the middle. For a long time, I just stand there, looking. The house in the background of the picture is the same house I built and repaired and defended. But it isn't mine in the old way anymore. It's better. It belongs to whoever needs it on any given week. To whoever decides to step across the threshold and carry out fewer stones than they brought in. I switch off the living room lamp, and the last light in the room settles on the brass letters carved with my wife's name. The letters hold the light like they were made for it. Somewhere down the road, the porch motion sensor clicks and a guest laughs, bright and surprised. I leave the window open a little wider so I can hear it. I thought the photograph my son wanted would lock me into a life where I stood at the edge while other people arranged themselves in the center. I was wrong. That photo never got printed. This one did. It isn't perfect. It's better than perfect. It's true. And it's staying right where it is.